I have a very special guest with me today, my watercolor teacher, Marcelo Del Dolce. Marcelo, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I have always wanted to learn how to paint watercolors as an adult, but I waited until I found the right teacher before I made the move to invest the time to study this. And Marcelo's work is just incredible. Marcelo, I found you on Instagram, paintings that you had done of like cityscapes and the inside of the Met, and feeling like, wow, these feel like Sargent. And it was after meeting Marcelo that I found out, well, you have a love of Sargent, right?
Yeah, Sargent is the person that exceed any expectations for watercolor.
I've had so many people ask me, hey, can you do a video about watercolor? Can you do a video about watercolor? And I felt like it would only be appropriate to have my teacher actually do that first watercolor lesson, because interestingly, Marcelo has just started a Patreon. How does that work, Marcelo?
Well, I'm just putting this information that you got now in Patreon. So basically, I have right now over 30 videos, and it's step by step. And then I have like this intermediary, which is just landscapes, and then the numbers are related to your level. I have a little more advanced, which are the master copies, and I'm adding all the time these beginners exercises, which is going to be a little bit about what we're going to do today. Because watercolor, actually, it's more important this basic, like what you had, which is the first day, and we're going to talk today, which I think is the core for anything.
Yep. The things that Marcelo taught me in those first few lessons have stayed with me. And they've stayed with me when I'm outside in the field and painting kind of spontaneously while the weather's changing, but they are also things that apply to me when I'm painting a pear on the table. Mise en place. I still hear that in my head, mise en place, mise en place. Don't just open your stuff and just put it out and be reaching all over. Set it up so that it's convenient.
Plus.
So we're going to cover a few things today, which really are the introduction to watercolor painting as Marcelo taught me a few years ago. So let's get to it.
Sure.
Marcelo, you're going to first mix the three consistencies of paint as we would use them, right?
Yeah, and then I will use sepia, which is a good color to start, which is just a dark color, can be burnt umber, but it's just going to be more like, usually I spend more time mixing. This is, I usually say that this is, which is the mise en place, this is meditation. You take your time, you mix, no rush, but then when you paint, then you need to be fast.
Yep.
So you guys are going to see more palette than actually painting.
Yep.
Which is the core. I still have students that are still with me for, I don't know, over many years. They still have trouble because they are still ignoring this beginning. And you remember, I said, this is the most important part.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. You can't just hope for the best.
Oh.
Which sometimes I catch myself. I'm like, and then I go over to the paper and I've painted it. And I'm like, why did you do that? You didn't even think like what consistency or, yeah.
You can hope for the best if you're in a different medium, because then you can go back and you can adjust. I usually say that you will never gonna see a museum announce an X-ray of a watercolor. There is X-rays of oil paintings.
Yes.
So you see things underneath that they were erased, scratched. Watercolor shows absolutely everything. I usually say watercolor doesn't lie.
There's no hiding place.
There's no hiding. It is what it is. So that's why this beginning is the most important part. All right, so the first thing you should consider is your setting as a mise en place. It's very efficient for you. So your palette's near your paper, your water is nearby. So it seems sometimes students laugh when I say this setting should be as it is, but I see palettes up there, waters up there.
Yeah, because can you just show us an example of when it's bad? Like this is what, or I've even seen this. right? Haven't you seen that in class?
You should not cover this because you need speed. So first of all, if you're a right hand, everything goes to the right. If you're a left hand, everything goes to the left. So you're not crossing. Everything should be as you're driving a shift car. Everything it's very close and everything is just fast and available for you. So a lot of water, your palette's clean, your paper. So that's basically the idea for the palette.
So palette, water, paper towel.
Anything that absorbs.
Okay. Like a cloth even, right?
Cloth will be fine.
Okay. And now, Marcelo, can you explain what you've done with the paper, like how you've set it up? It's not flat on the table. You taped it to a board using art tape, right? Like this is...
Yeah, do not use painter's tape because it has acid. In 10 years, your paintings will have a yellow edge, which mine has this taste because I didn't know about that. So always artist tape.
Yep.
Secondly is when you tape your paper, this is not how you tape your paper. Absolutely not this way because everything is gonna buckle.
Yep.
You tape this way. Everything gets taped. Right? So I have different easels on my studio, but you need to have some sort of angle when you paint.
Okay.
You don't need really buy an easel. This is just one of Rajiv's spots. So you just need to have your work at least set in a way that doesn't move. And the angle depends of what you paint, but that's for more advanced classes. For this exercise, just keep it simple, something like a 40-degree. That would be already good.
Okay.
So for the first wash, remember what I said, it's not what you see, it's the consistency. So you need to think about like a tea consistency, and you always squeeze fresh paint. Or if you already have colors in all your palette, then you just keep it this palette maybe in a Ziploc, spray some water always. So you always need this palette to be extremely moist, and the color should be buttery. Like this would be a problem. This seems okay, but you always also fill it up until the top.
Oh.
No,
someone has been very bad.
This is
my palette Marcelo's using.
Rajiv is not showing.
You haven't seen this in a while.
Just got an E here, not an A.
Okay, so Marcelo, can you also talk about the paint that you use? Because people have asked me about that. You use liquid watercolor paint. You don't use the pans, right?
Well, when I say liquid, this is like, creamy.
Creamy, yeah, but it's like a tube.
Yeah, because when you say liquid, you can have like echolene, which is like liquid. Just like from the tube, creamy. I usually say that the brands, they all have their professional grades. Always look for professional, never compromise watercolor, even paper, or your brushes, or your paint. Rajiv has a very fancy palette that I even don't want to tell you guys how much did he pay. But don't worry about the palette. The palette could be anything as long as you have spaces for mixing. If your palette is one of those palettes that is like this, that doesn't have space, that is only color areas, that's a problem. You need to have space to mix your paint, because now we are only using one color. Imagine when you're using multiple colors. So always have space. Always have fresh paint. Always have a lot of creamy colors, not as Rajiv without dry colors. But we are only using one color. So look how this is very, very watery, and you need to have a lot of water. Please already have this in mind. If you have a larger area, don't use a small brush. If you have a larger area, which we will fill it up, this area here, you use a large, even larger than that would be okay. So the first wash is you just mix a lot. This is also part of the mise en place. If you are cooking, I don't know, whatever, you make enough sauce, onions, whatever it is. Because as you are cooking, you don't have the time to, let's say, stop and cut extra onions. So always have here more than what you're gonna use. So the first wash, what I'm gonna do a little test here, just to see. See, just a little test. This is my, like, say, 30% of pigment. And then I will go through the whole wash. And attention that once I paint, I have this, what I call the puddle. So this is the key. So the goal is every time I paint, attention to this part here, I also recharge, reload my brush. It's not paint, 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 paint. Your brush is going to get dry. You paint and you recharge. Once you're done, take the excess of your brush and you just pull that puddle. Do it because if you're not, it will bounce back and you will have a belly.
Like the color will bloom back up into the paint.
Yes.
Right. And that's just a simple single colored wash, right?
The speed is what matters because like this is basically grease from the fingers, but what you should not have is a lot of steps, right? Also, every time you paint, make sure that your brush is completely wet. This is a problem. This is great. You always need to have that puddle in the bottom.
To connect to the next
Yes.
stroke, right? Okay.
And then the next layer is going to be the milk. But before I go there, I'm just going to share with you the idea. So the idea is that you will fill it up an area.
With the thinnest wash.
The thinnest wash. And then you leave a highlight. That's how you have, at least in this system that I have, 3 steps. You have 3D filling. So here is another example. I will leave the highlight from the top. And then you just fill it up. So you don't see that this is a cube yet, but you will see that later. Right, the next one, I will move towards the next one soon, but this is just to show you what not to do. You do not paint this stage this way here. You start to paint, right? And then you decide to touch the water. Because if you touch the water, this will be lighter. So a common error that students do, they keep touching the water all the time. Every time you touch the water, it becomes lighter. And you need to have a percentage here on this first layer. Also, attention to, you never paint, I mean, this is a small area, you're not gonna feel that much, but you don't paint all the way down. It's a print machine. It's like a inkjet print.
So you mean paint horizontally, not vertically?
Never, because it will dry. If the bottom dries, then you will overlap the painting. And when I say overlap, is that then it will have this sort of, you see how it has like a third layer. This, it's problematic in the future. You see how it's not connecting? Here, look at the bottom. This is wet.
Yeah.
There is no overlapping. It's still wet.
Because you were painting wet into wet.
Yes, so as long as it's wet, you connect. If it dries, it's over.
It's too late.
I always have the same question. How do I fix if it's already dry? There's nothing to do.
You mean there's no fixing?
There's no way to fix like this overlapping here. That's why watercolor is so forgiving. You can Google. Please go to your computer right now and Google what is the most difficult medium to master, what is the most difficult medium to learn, because this it's unforgiving. It's already dry. So this is a key problem for most of watercolor painters. Is that they let it dry and then the connections, they don't happen. The next layer is the same thing. You will mix a bunch. Look how I grab so much paint. Maybe this is too much, but it's better to have more pigment than no pigment. Always have that in mind.
So you're taking the consistency that you had, which was like tea, and now you're adding more paint to make it thicker.
Yes.
Like the consistency of
milk, cream.
Okay.
And then it's important still to have a lot of pigment here. And it's going to be the same idea. You paint, you recharge, you paint, you recharge, you paint, you recharge. Also, attention to how this, the bottom is darker and the top is getting lighter. This is also a problem in watercolor. Every time a watercolor is wet, it's darker. Look how this is lighter now, and this is darker. So this is because some colors are sinking in the paper, some colors are evaporating with the water, so watercolor always lights.
It dries lighter.
It dries lighter.
And this was something that was very tricky to learn early on, anticipating how dark to make the color when it was wet so that it would be the correct value when it was dry.
I usually say, when you paint,
Yeah.
if it looks right, it won't be.
Right, because it's going to dry lighter.
It's always going to dry lighter.
Right.
So always anticipate that slightly 10-20%. It depends of the pigment too. It depends of the brand. So here for just a small area here, so you see I'm pulling the excess.
Mm-hmm.
So here's just the idea that I will create now three-dimensional sphere here. And it might look too dark now, but it will light. And here is negative space. Can go over here because there's a third layer coming. Here's the same idea, so here it's positive space. And here is negative. And as you see it, you will feel how this is three-dimensional. But here, which is always the problem, as most of the time students are so afraid of putting pigment, things tend to be dull, and the values, they instead of being dark, they are light. So here, for example, if I apply, it might look okay, but it will dry lighter. And here's the same thing. It might look okay right now, but later it will dry lighter. So this is the example of what to do. This is what not to do. One very important part of this system is that your brush is always being loaded. You are always working in large strokes, and attention to avoid pointillism. This is not pointillism. Unless you have final details off, I don't know, leaves or something like that. But the main problem is that sometimes people they're dabbing. It's not a dabbing technique. At least this sort of a Sargent-esque. It's all a flow. Flow. So, attention to this part here. So this is the maple syrup.
So you've mixed this thicker now? You've
Yes.
added more paint to this,
More pigment.
more pigment, and made it...
Thicker. It's almost like 100%. But attention to this part here. So look, now I'm going to have another puddle here. This is also very important to consider. Do you see the difference between this and that?
I don't know if this will pick it up, but... like the consistency.
It looks, as you see, it looks the same. I'm talking about the look.
Right.
But look how this is lighter. See here? This one. And how this one is darker. So a very important part is, it's not what you see,
On the palette.
it's the consistency.
Yeah.
So the last one, it's a little thicker. I'm going to add a little more pigment here. So same idea. As it's thicker, it won't be as washy, but you still need to think about these connections. And as you see, light, middle, dark.
Yep.
And for the little examples here, that it would be your core shadow. Let's imagine you have a reflected light. and would be your cast shadow. So this way you have three-dimensional feeling. Same thing here, this could be your cast shadow from the cube. But then the problem here, which is usually sometimes students get confused, is if you still think like that this is dark and you paint that, it's not as dark. So what's happening is you really don't have three-dimensional. Three-dimensional everywhere. Just film here around the table. Look how some areas are darker. So if you want realism, once it's dark, it is dark.
Mm-hmm.
Like here, if you try to make something dark, but it's not dark enough and it's dull, it will never have this feeling. This is the key. Very simple exercise. And remember, it's about speed, but here there is no speed. Take your time, mix the colors, make sure. You should always finish the puddle with leftovers, because if you don't have enough and then you, let's say, start to paint and you don't have enough and you try to remake it, it won't be the same.
Yep. So there should always be something remaining in your palette.
Use next time.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you.
Ready?
Yep.
All right, now that we settled the idea for the values, we'll talk very briefly about the idea of gradation. So there is this idea of wet on wet and wet on dry. Basically, you have your brush that you're painting, and you have another brush, which could be any brush. I usually call this soft brush. It's important to have a different brush. So the idea is that you have wet paper with wet painting and pigment, and then you have wet on wet. The other one is wet painting on dry paper, but then you soft the edges with that brush. This is just a concept for now creating the three-dimensional, which is a little more realistic. One quick exercise that it helps you to at least understand the gradation. It's almost like a little bit about mathematical percentage here. And one simple exercise, it's the puddle that it's, let's say, cream maple syrup. And then as I will paint, I will add water in this mixture. Actually, I'm going to pull some of this right here.
So you're going to go from a thick consistency to a thinner consistency.
Yes, I will create a gradation here.
Yes.
From dark to light.
Okay.
And it's going to be about adding water. So you have a bottle, you add water, and then you do another one, you add water, and you mix, and you another one, and you add water, do another one, mix water, another one, more water. Now I'm almost like cleaning my brush. And you just end with your brush. So this is just a quick exercise to see that there is a gradient, but there is no spots.
Yep. I think I did like 50 of these when you first showed me this and said, do this every day, multiple times a day. Gradations.
Yeah, the gradations, there's just a way for you to understand, because while you're painting, this, for example, would be good for like a sky, right?
Yes.
But there are moments on the painting that you need to variate lights and darks, lights and darks. So this is just a muscle memory exercise. This exercise is just push-ups. What really makes more of what the painting might be is these two aspects here. But these are all different. There's no better than another. This is more abstract, harder to define, and it makes the most beautiful blooms. This is more representation. It's better for details, but the softs, they tend to be a little more contrived. When you paint, you just mix both of them.
Both these techniques.
Yes.
Now what?
Right, so this is just a quick exercise of how to mix colors. This is just a very basic demo of what it might be. So a good exercise would be you make a warmer color, then you see how there's a lot of pigment here. And you need to have a cold color. So let me grab Rajiv's cobalt turquoise, and look, for all of you there that are beginners and you want to save money, Rajiv is going to be so upset that I'm going to do this right now.
No, I'm not. I don't care.
But you do not squeeze your paint this way.
Like a little blob.
No, because
like a little dab.
Watercolor never goes bad. You always can open your palette, spray some water.
Yeah.
If you have a stillborn dried color, get a bristle brush for oil, and you just scrape that. It's going to come back to life. Never use your watercolor brushes, nice ones, to do that.
Okay.
So this is how you should squeeze. Look at that. That's how you do it.
Wow. Okay. An ample amount of paint.
It's never going to go bad.
This is what Marcelo has been telling all of his students. When I'm in the class with a bunch of other students, he's always walking around saying, more, squeeze more paint in there.
Because the more paint you have, actually, the faster the painting is going to be, the more vibrant and more lush the painting is going to be. A very quick exercise is that you mix both two colors, and let's say you have a rectangle here, and then it's very simple. You will paint, and then you will get a little bit of this color, and you mix here. And you're going to see that it's going to be a little bit of like a math
proportions, right?
Proportions here. So you're going to be 10%, 20%. But what is important for me is to have an area that I do not touch, because that's going to be the final area, which is going to be around here. That's going to be that pure orangey color. So you paint a little bit of this color and you mix. Paint a little more of this color and you mix. You paint a little more of this color and you mix. You paint a little more of this color and you mix. Paint. Now this is contaminated. I'm just going to move towards the left here. See? But it's important is I get the color and I mix. And then look how the gradation is happening. Once you're done, clean your brush, take the excess, no lines. The goal is you have a plan and you follow the plan, which means while you're painting, you're not doing this. Because that's when you mud everything, right? You had a plan, which was, I had coming from right to left slowly, which means I would end it with that color. This is also an application that you need to have puddles. That puddle, a friend of mine called the little belly. That is the most important part, because as long as that is wet, you can connect, you can make things lighter, you can make things darker, and then always there is a natural flow. In watercolor, this kind of watercolor, very important to know this. You are a maker and you are also an spectator, because you don't know what's going to happen. If you are a maker and you try to control everything, then you tend to have a painting that it's a little tight. If you are into tight paintings, that's fine.
Like last week, I was just sitting at the table and just over and over, just practicing as the pears were getting riper and riper. The pears started off green, and then they turned yellow. And, you know, I think when someone looks at this that doesn't know anything about painting, that's the word that comes into their head is talent, because they just keep hearing it over and over again. But really, this started 3 years ago with what Marcelo just showed us. It started with me doing this and this over and over and over again. So for everyone that has asked me, how do I begin? How do I learn? My suggestion would be truly join Marcelo's Patreon. I'm so glad that this finally exists.
Appreciate it.
Really, the reason why I've stayed away from making a watercolor video is because I want you to show them. You're the teacher, and I've learned so much. This has been such an added value to my life.
Appreciate it.
Being able to take paint and
Thank you.
paint something, and for everyone out there that's inspired, this is how to do it. Thank you, Marcelo.
Thank you so much. Yes, it was a pleasure to show it to you again.
Great.